Thank you for that warm introduction, and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So building on Rabbi Cosgrove's introduction a few moments ago, we find ourselves here this morning on the cusp of Purim 5784, one of the two Jewish holidays that obligate us to make merry. The other holiday that does that is Simchat Torah. And it was on the eve of Simchat Torah that we diaspora Jews learned about the horrific massacres on October 7th. It felt impossible to mark Simchat Torah that evening with joy. In my own synagogue, we didn't even try. And then we did our best the next morning to make our way through Hakafot. So much has happened since that day in Israel, in Gaza, in the United States, and around the world. We know we need to celebrate happy moments, both personally and communally, even though we remain brokenhearted about the hostages still in captivity, the Israelis who have been displaced from their homes close to the border, the soldiers who have lost their lives or been injured, or those soldiers still fighting for safety and security. We are deeply pained by the thousands of Palestinians whose lives have been lost and by those who suffer from hunger and displacement. Closer to home, we are also acutely aware of the great increase in anti-Semitism that was ignited on that very day, October 7th. We and so many Jews all over the country are feeling a sense of vulnerability that most of us never thought we would experience in our lifetimes. And what will we read this evening? The quintessential story about anti-Semitism in the diaspora. And we're supposed to celebrate this evening, but some of us are having a hard time putting ourselves in the mode, in a celebratory mode. Perhaps there are some new insights we can glean from this story, insights that will help us better understand the current moment and find a hopeful way forward. So let's look a little more carefully at the book of Esther. It's a story set in ancient Persia that, according to scholars, was written in the 2nd century BCE. Actually, around the time of the events that led to the Hanukkah story. The story reflects the fact that anti-Semitism first manifested itself during that era, as the Greeks conquered territories and worked to acculturate its inhabitants to the ideas, practices, and ideals of Greek civilization, a process known as Hellenization. They encountered resistance from Jews throughout the empire. Jews whose distinct identity precluded their assimilation to Hellenistic culture. Jews were different, and the Hellenizers couldn't abide it. Here's how it is described in the Megillah, in chapter 3, verse 8. Vayomer Haman lamelech Achashverosh, yeshno am echad, mefuzar umeforad bein ha'amim, bechol medinot malchutecha, v'datehem shonot mikol am, ve'et datei hamelech einam osim, v'lamelech ein shova lahanicham. Haman said to King Achashverosh, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the other peoples in all the provinces of your realm, whose laws are different from those of any other people and who do not obey the king's laws. it is not in your majesty's interest to tolerate them. And then Haman goes on to say, if it please your majesty, let there be an edict drawn for their destruction. And he's even bribing the king to make it happen. I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the stewards for deposit in the royal treasury. Jews must be destroyed because Haman could not tolerate difference. He found it threatening and recommended destroying the people to ensure an obedient, homogenized society. We see a real-life manifestation of this just a few decades after this was written. We usually think of pogroms as occurring in 19th century Eastern Europe, but tensions among the Romans and the Jews led to a pogrom in Alexandria, Egypt, in the year 38 CE, instigated by the Roman Emperor Caligula. It was carried out by a mob. And all of this occurred despite the fact that Jews made up 2/5 of the population of Alexandria and had their own autonomous organization and rights. The Roman historian Tacitus in the 1st century provided additional color on this to understand why Jews were so hated. He wrote that the Jews regarded as profane what the Romans held sacred and vice versa. Their practices were wicked. They were especially inclined to lust. In his words, Jews throughout their history were the most despised of subject peoples and the basest of nations. You see here that very quickly, difference equals evil. Those who are different are debased and despised. The Purim story, then, is the quintessential story that tells us that the roots of anti-Semitism go back to ancient civilization, roots that were then reinforced and strengthened through Christian theology and then spread through as a result of the Christianization of Europe. We also see that Jews already internalized and understood that Jew hatred was ingrained in society and that its roots lay in Jewish practice, many of which highlight Jews as different. We see in the Babylonian Talmud, there is a tractate on Megillah that deals with all the laws around observing Purim. And in Megillah 13b, the rabbis understood Haman's complaint as resulting from the fact that Jews, 1, do not eat from our food. 2, nor do they marry our women, nor do they marry their women off to us. 3, Jews are lazy because they spend the entire year in idleness. They're constantly saying, Shabbat Hayom, Pesach Hayom, it's Shabbat, it's Pesach. In other words, Jews are celebrating holidays all the time that prevent them from working and contributing to society. And finally, Jews don't respect Gentiles. They, quote, scorn the throne because they won't drink wine that has been touched by a Gentile. So the rabbis understood anti-Semitism and its pervasiveness in society, but they don't really offer us any advice on how to deal with it. We could use some of that advice today. For in 2024, we find ourselves identifying with the fear that the Jews of Shushan must have felt. Like us, American Jews, they must have felt themselves comfortably integrated into Persian society. After all, the Persian queen was a Jew, and that did not register in anyone's consciousness, even though her uncle, Mordecai, who had already been identified as a Jew in the chapter before, came by every day to court to check up on her, make sure everything was okay. Only when Haman felt threatened did the situation change, and seemingly overnight, the Jews didn't know what hit them. Some of us feel that way today. We read statistics from the ADL about the rising numbers of anti-Semitic incidents. We read the Franklin Four article entitled "The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending," or Dara Horn's article, "Why the Most Educated People in America Fall for Anti-Semitic Lies." This is unnerving to us. And if you, even whether or not you have children in college, you are all too aware of the dramatic spike in anti-Semitic rhetoric, harassment, and erasure that has erupted on college campuses. So what do we do? Esther was in a position to save the Jews of Shushan because she was both deeply acculturated into Persian society and deeply concerned about the welfare of the Jewish people. Like Esther, we ought not let fear overwhelm us. We ought not withdraw from engaging with society. Rather, like Esther, we must engage even when it feels uncomfortable or risky to do so. We must own our pride and our identity as Jews and as Americans. And from that vantage point, we must continue to build bridges with those around us. How do we do this at the Jewish Theological Seminary? Our undergraduate students are on the front lines. They are dually enrolled at JTS and at Columbia University or Barnard College. Thankfully, they are able to access the education, the community, and the strength that comes from being part of the Jewish Theological Seminary community. It fortifies them in their efforts to engage with students and faculty at Columbia and Barnard on difficult issues in class, through extracurriculars, through the Columbia newspaper. Moreover, we have at JTS been redoubling our efforts in the interfaith arena. Our Milstein Center for Interreligious Understanding has hosted, just in the past 2 months, 3 imams from around the world, 2 from Indonesia, one of whom who did a several-month fellowship at JTS to learn with us, and one who is the executive director of the Abrahamic House in Abu Dhabi. They sought out the Jewish Theological Seminary because they are Muslim religious centrists and pluralists, and they wanted to learn from us and work with us to make this message, this perspective of pluralism, of respect, of working together, more manifest in a moment of such division. We're also working with Columbia University's Office of Religious Affairs on an interfaith initiative that will bring our students and Columbia students, Jews and Muslims, together into relationship with one another. I personally have spent a lot of time since October 7, extending myself to New York City college presidents who are eager to learn how to uproot anti-Semitism from their campuses. I believe that as the head of a Jewish institution of higher learning, I have a unique role in this moment to play in deepening their understanding of the sui generis nature of anti-Semitism, its insidious impact on Jews, and the role it plays in weakening not only universities, but societies as a whole, that are societies that are devoted to truth, democracy, and the rule of law. JTS is going to be hosting a convening on anti-Semitism and allyship, April 8th and 9th. You are all invited, but space is limited, so right after Shabbat, before you come for Megillah reading, please sign up. It will begin with a closed-door session that I am hosting for these college presidents, but then it will be followed by 2 days of programming. 2 of them will be interreligious sessions, one that I will be participating in with Catholic and Muslim scholars on the religious roots of anti-Semitism, one that engages in interreligious dialogue, and many other timely and engaging sessions with scholars, students, artists, and more. Given the enormous challenges we are facing in our world, we want our students, undergraduates, but especially our future Jewish leaders, rabbis, cantors, Jewish educators, Jewish communal professionals, to be involved in such events, for it will give them the skills, perspective, and insight needed, as Rabbi Cosgrove said before, so needed to lead the next generation of Jews. Leaders who will help our children and our grandchildren live proudly as Jews and forge a meaningful synthesis of their American and Jewish identities, even during fraught times. Our students are not monolithic. They come from different backgrounds and hold a wide range of perspectives on the challenges that the Jewish people face. We grapple with these complicated issues daily, even as we study, eat, celebrate, pray, and grieve together. I want to end by taking one more look at Esther chapter 3, verse 8. You'll recall that it begins, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your realm." In addition to the simple meaning of this text, the 19th and 20th century Polish Hasidic rabbi, Yerachmiel Yisrael Yitzchak Danziger, offers another perspective on this verse in his Torah commentary, the Yismach Yisrael. He suggests that the Jews were scattered and dispersed from one another. For him, this verse demonstrates that enemies can only harm Jews when there is division and hatred among them. We know that October 7th has driven a wedge, not only between Israel and the rest of the world, between Jews and Gentiles, but also within families, among Jews. Different perspectives on the situation in Israel and Gaza have stifled conversation and disrupted friendships. We at JTS push back against this. Our convening will bring people together. Every day, we help our students gain the skills, knowledge, and confidence to speak with one another across difference. We are fortifying and empowering our students so that they will be able to model this behavior when they're out there in the world, whether in a synagogue, on a college campus, in a summer camp, school, and more. With your support, we will help secure a healthy future, no matter what outside challenges we may face, and we will have to face. So as we read the Megillah tonight, let us remember what unites us as a people, what we love about our tradition. Let's remember why, even when we are in pain, we need to muster the energy to celebrate and to support the institutions that further these aims. Shabbat Shalom.